It's always wonderful to be in your presence, Satsvarup Maharaj. When I joined the movement, I started in New York, but Ramananda sent me to Boston.
You took my typing service from me.
When I got to Boston, there was Satsvarup and Jadharani, and then there was me and 3 other brahmacharinis, Rukmini, Saradia, and Janava. And Satsvarup asked me what I know how to do, what kind of service I could do, and I couldn't think of anything. He said, "Do you know how to paint?" I said, "No." "Do you know how to cook?" "No." He kind of went through this big list, and then finally he said, "Do you know how to type?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "So you can help me with the typing of Prabhupada's books." So I'm always very indebted to you for having that service throughout the time Srila Prabhupada was here, in different ways, typing from his manuscripts and typing from his dictaphone tapes. And typing is, I always think of typing as such an ordinary activity, But when you were typing Prabhupada's books, it was totally transcendental. It was no longer ordinary. It was beyond everything. Wasn't sure what I was going to say today, but I thought maybe I would just tell this little story from the early days in Boston. I personally got initiated through the mail. Prabhupada used to do that, initiate us through the mail and send our beads to us after you chanted on them. And in the spring of 1969, he came to New York, and all of us devotees from Boston went down there to greet him. And that was the second time that I saw Srila Prabhupada in person. The first time I did see him in Tompkins Square Park, and I didn't become a devotee then, but I joined in the chanting and heard what he had to say about the Mahamantra. And then I walked away and I didn't give it another thought. But I think that, the seed must have been planted at that time. And then like a few months later when I turned 18, I immediately left home and moved to the village and ended up living a few blocks away from the temple. And I used to walk past the temple all the time and kind of peek my head in. I never went all the way in at that time. I just looked. And I'd see some devotees coming out and thinking, this looks really weird. And then I remember seeing the devotees at the first BN in Central Park. Were you at that?
I think so.
And personally, I was high, as most people were, on LSD. Practically everybody that was there was on LSD. And there was all this crazy stuff going on. It was, this happening on Easter Sunday, first thousands of people, I think, thousands of hippies. And all kinds of crazy stuff going on. And then I saw the devotees pass by, and they were in a single line, single file, chanting Hare Krishna. And it was like they were these celestial beings. The vibe was so different, you know, it was just a totally different vibe. Anyhow, I guess I had to suffer a bit more in the material world for some months more, and then when I suffered enough, I had gotten to chanting Hare Krishna on my LSD trips. And I had thought that LSD was the answer to everything, and then I had this really bad trip, and started calling out to Krishna. I didn't even know what I was doing, but that's what happened, and that's when everything changed for me, and that's when I took shelter of the movement of Prabhupada. So anyhow, the next time I saw Srila Prabhupada was when he came to New York, and all the devotees from, I guess, different parts of the East Coast all came to greet him at the airport, and we were waiting for him at one gate, and it turned out that it was the wrong gate. And all of a sudden somebody said, "Oh, Srila Prabhupada's coming from there." So we all zoomed over to this other gate, and we fell down at his lotus feet. And I was a new devotee, so I wasn't sure how long to stay down, offering obeisances, and so I kind of peeked my head out like that, and Prabhupada was standing right there. He patted my head. And so then the temple had moved. It wasn't 26 2nd Avenue, it was the next one, 61 2nd Avenue, but Prabhupada still had his room, his apartment, just beyond the temple. And I remember one time I was peeking in this window frame into his room.
Yeah.
And he was sitting in the room, and I guess I was being really rude, just looking through the window at him. But anyhow, he told me to come into the room, and he asked me what my name was. I said it completely incorrectly. And he said, "Oh, Arundhati." I still can't say it right now. And he told the story about Arundhati, and that she was married to Vishishta Muni, one of the 7 great sages. And Srila Prabhupada looked at me and he said, "So, Arundhati, you will marry a great sage?" And I said, "Yes, Srila Prabhupada, I will marry a great sage." So people who know Prajuna will understand that. Because that's who I ended up marrying. He's very sage-like. And so we used to be able to come up to his room and have darshan all the time. And one time he came out of his room and he said to his secretary, Purushottam, "See if there's somebody that would like to take care of my deities, bathe them each day." And I just kind of called out, "Oh, I'll do it, Srila Prabhupada." So he said, "Okay, come to my room." tomorrow and I'll show you what to do. And he had these little Radha Govinda deities, brass deities. And he came and sat down. His seat would be over there and the deities were right across the room from him. So he came and sat down on the floor next to me, and he told his servant Purushottam to bring some fuller's earth and tamarind paste. And he told me to make a mixture out of this, adding some water, make a mixture of these two things. And he took Radharani and he put the paste on Radharani. And then he took a cloth and he rubbed the cloth and made Radharani very shiny. And then he took Krishna and he handed Krishna to me. And he said, now you do Krishna. So I put the paste on and he watched me put it on, and then he went back to his seat and I started rubbing Krishna and rubbing Krishna, and I was thinking, oh my God, I can't get Krishna shiny enough. And I'm rubbing and rubbing and rubbing and rubbing, and he said, it is good. Come back tomorrow. So I was fortunate to get to do this service in Srila Prabhupada's room while he was in New York, and then he came to Boston, and I also got to do it there. And then eventually I went to Columbus, and Prabhupada's deities had gotten lost in the mail somehow or other. They just disappeared for quite a while. I think it was a number of weeks. And eventually I went to Columbus to get married to Virginia. And the deities came back that day. So when I went to see Srila Prabhupada in his room, he said, the deities like the way you took care of them. Therefore they have decided to return. Back in Boston, when Prabhupada came there, he, I think it was Sadhguru, told Prabhupada that the women, the girls, were fighting with each other a lot. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And Prabhupada said, that is because they need to get married. Immediately arranged. He was leaving in a few days. He said, immediately arrange, I will perform the wedding. So some brahmacharis were called down from Montreal. And some others. I think it was already a known fact that Saradya and Vaikuntanath were going to get married. And then I think somehow or other at Mini and Bharadraj, that was also a done deal. So Prabhupada said Janava could marry Nanda Kishore. I remember Jayapataka came down. I don't think he came down to get married, but he came to see Prabhupada. And this devotee Dayal Nitai came, and Prabhupada said I should marry Dayal Nitai. And I flipped out. I just didn't have any feeling in me to want to marry him. And it was a huge conflict. I don't know if he's still a devotee now. I have never heard anything more about him. But I had a huge conflict in my mind because Srila Prabhupada had said to marry this person. And I had a very strong feeling not to do it. and I went up to this, there was a hill near where we lived, and I went up the hill and I was crying to Krishna, praying. I was totally distraught about, and just in such conflict about this. And so I came back down from the hill, and I saw Jadharani and Satsvarup, and I told them I really didn't want to marry this person. So I went in with Satsvarup to Prabhupada's room. And Satsvarup told Prabhupada that I didn't want to marry this person. And Prabhupada said, that is all right. Nothing is by force in Krishna consciousness. If you don't want to get married now, you can get married at some later date. So I was very relieved. And then I said, well, Prabhupada, I heard about Upendra. I heard he's a really nice devotee. Maybe I could marry him. And he was in Seattle. So Prabhupada said, well, so far as I know, he wants to remain brahmachari, but you and Satsvarup can call him up, and if he wants to get married, then you have my blessings. So we went and called Upendra, and he was in shock, because he basically would have had to come tomorrow from Seattle to Boston, and get married. So he thought about it, and he called back the next day and said no, he didn't want to get married, he wanted to remain a brahmachari at that time. So then the next day, I didn't get married. Prabhupada performed kind of a famous wedding with these three couples. I think it was in one of the Back to Godheads. And the temple then became mostly a Grihastha temple, because it was 4 Grihastha temples then, 4 Grihastha couples. And I was the only brahmacharini. And when Devananda, he was the only brahmachari in the temple. And I felt very uncomfortable. All of a sudden, I felt like I didn't fit in at all. And I had been so happy before that, just serving. But all of a sudden, everything changed. And we were all living in this very small apartment and lying on, we had little corners of this room to sleep in, So it was pretty austere. And anyhow, I started praying to Krishna and Prabhupada. Prabhupada, I'm sorry I didn't get married then, but please send me a husband. I was praying like that a lot, and then I got a call from Purushottam. And they were in Columbus, Ohio, and he said, Prabhupada wants to know if you'd like to come here and marry Pradyumna. He thinks that you would make a good couple because you're both working on his books. And so you have a joint service, and the whole thing with marriages in those days, and I guess it's still supposed to be that way today in the movement, is that that if you're both serving Krishna, then you have this joint, you're united together in your service. So I said, yes, I'll come and marry. I had met Pradyumna once. He had come to Boston once. And I don't know if we actually spoke to each other, but I knew what he looked like. And I said, okay, I'll come there. So Srila Prabhupada married us in Columbus. So that's a little story about how involved Srila Prabhupada was at that time in the marriages and all these things that these little kind of insignificant things that we would come to Prabhupada about. And eventually he did get disgusted with arranging marriages and didn't want to do it anymore. because there was quite a bit of divorce and, people just not getting on with each other. So I think I'll stop there, except that I was going to read this poem that I had written quite a while back. And it says, I'm not sure what you call this when you have the first letters of a poem?
That spells something?
Yeah. Is that called, it has a name.
I don't know.
Acronym?
Acronym? Okay. So I wrote this acronym that says all glories to Srila Prabhupada, going down the left-hand side. And so each line starts with one of the letters of that, and I'll just read that. All glories to Jagat Guru, life has come to me from you. Love you taught me how to do, Govinda who is color blue. Lost I was before you came, O giver of the holy name. Roasting in a fire of hell, I was in a deep dark well. Every day was so depressing, such it was, I am confessing. Total misery and pain, only loss, nowhere gain. So it was until one day Radha Krishna came my way. In the form of Harinam, love was awakened, ending calm. All because of your love for Jiva, Prabhupada, greater than Brahma and Shiva. Remembering your lotus feet, all can be saved from defeat. By your grace, you've come to me, you've taught me of reality. Under your feet, I beg to stay. Pleasing you is the only way. Always may I remember the goal, devotional service pure from the soul. So I saw Srila Prabhupada in, this was written in 1976, and I saw Srila Prabhupada in Mayapur